Hi, listener. This is From Ideology to Unity, a spiritual journey where we let go of ego and ideological doctrine in favor of meaning, purpose, and unity as a whole. Today, I'm interviewing Lindsay Zimmerman from the Better Than podcasts. She describes the podcast as anarchic philosophy on demand. At a time of transition into the age of Aquarius and a new Earth, Lindsay's attention is on how the people can work together to build new ways of living. So, how are you doing?
Very good. Very good.
So, how did you originally get into spirituality and anarchy?
Um, well, I can't say that I think of myself as an anarchist.
Okay.
I truly appreciate where anarchist philosophy comes from, the needs and desires that it stems from, and the problems that it's trying to address. I definitely um, can or feel like I'm aligned with those values. Um, but I would have to say, just from a very, very young age, having a fundamental sense within my being that something was not right, that we're not living how we should be or could be living. Um, Being very young and picking up that we have a disconnection from nature. Um, and I've always been someone who truly appreciates being a human being and my natural state, appreciating having a physical body and all of the amazing things that the human body can do, um, and valuing the human body and being human in our natural state. And I've always felt this disconnection between what it means to be naturally human and how our society is set up, our beliefs about ourselves, our beliefs about other human beings. There's just been a disconnection between how I've felt my whole life, to, in regard to that, what is true in that natural human sense, and how the rest of the world views humanity and has structured our societal interactions and belief systems. And so the older I got and the more knowledge and experience and personal growth I've had, the more I realized that really the only thing that's preventing us from living correctly is ourselves. And so my aim is to encourage every human to fulfill their own potential, um, which is one of the very nasty consequences of the way our society is structured. As long as anybody can remember, is that it's not designed to optimize human potential. And I want to live in a world that does. So that's the mission that I'm on.
Well, to say your mission very much aligns with mine. So that's why I was so excited to, well, discover your podcast, really, because I just felt that it was perfect for what I'm doing. So I'm glad to have
And I
you on.
do thank you very much. And I do want to say one more thing about anarchy. What I value most about that type of philosophy is the emphasis on individual and self-governance. To me, that is one of the most important um, facets of reality today, is understanding self-governance and taking that responsibility and not handing it over to an authority. And that in that way, that is how I most appreciate anarchy, is because fundamentally it's a spiritual idea. And the philosophy of anarchy gets very, very deep. It is a truly beautiful philosophy. You know, putting aside how people might feel about the actual functionality of anarchy, the idea, the philosophy of it is truly perfect.
Okay. Well, what do you think of, how do I put this? So, individualism is a key aspect of anarchy. And however, in spirituality, there's this concept of that we're all one and that humanity is like unite. There's a unity to us as a whole. And even in anarchy, there's a sort of many aspects of anarchy or forms of anarchy have collective aspects. So, in your mind, how do we integrate the individualism with the unity aspect?
Well, and you have to, this can get very, very convoluted because there's many different ideas about the idea of unity and consciousness. There is, the Gnostic belief system, there's Hinduism, there's Buddhism. There's all of these different ideas about what unity is. I want to, for the purpose of illustrating how this connects with anarchy, there's the idea of Hyperionism. So Hyperionism is based in logic, reason, and mathematics. So it is a spiritual belief system, but they use what we understand about mathematics to interpret physics and chemistry and all of those things to understand the nature, not just of reality, but consciousness. And so in Hyperionism, they view the individual as just one facet of God. So if the absolute mind is that's what they call it, is the absolute mind, is the creator of everything. In order to gain experience, in order to gain more knowledge, the absolute mind fractured, and all the pieces of the universe became each of those little facets of the absolute mind, and that includes human beings. And so how I interpret that is that we are not gods, but we are God. And so in my mind and in my value system, that leads me to the inevitable conclusion that I have an obligation to provide the deepest, richest level of experience back to that collective mind, that absolute mind, because that's what each of us are here to do. We're not here to live the same life as our neighbor, right? We are here to have our own individual experiences, whether those be traumas or events of elation or whatever it is, small epiphanies that we have in our mind through our own individual thought processes. We're here to have all of those experiences and to have them be unique, to have them be authentic to ourselves. And that is how we are contributing the value of our experience back to that collective, that unified mind, that that source that we all get our consciousness from. Which is why when I see cookie cutter Stepford neighborhoods, little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky. Do you know that one?
I don't know the tune, but I
You don't know
get what
that?
you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. When I see that, there's something really deep within, I'm going to say deep within my spirit, not just my emotional, physical, chemical interpretation, but deep within my spirit, I feel something that is like akin to like being betrayed almost, because I see people that are in situations, in lifestyles, maybe jobs. It's, authentic to every individual where their perception, their authenticity is being limited. And if you're there by choice, if you truly enjoy that lifestyle and it's all you've ever dreamed of, and that's the experience that you want to have, you are welcomed and encouraged by the universe to have that experience. But some people are in that experience because they feel that it's expected of them. They feel that it's a social norm, and they've been encouraged to keep up with the Joneses, let's say. And a consequence of that is ignoring their own authenticity. And that's where that sense of betrayal, because if we are all connected, I am betraying myself when I see someone living a life that they don't want to be living. That is me betraying myself, and it hurts. So that's how that idea from anarchy, that individualism is so spiritual. The individual responsibility, making your own choices, not being told what choices are available to you, because that's kind of people, in society today, everything is set up so that you have choices, but they're the choices that an authority would like you to make, as opposed to being using your mind's eye to see opportunity and innovation and authenticity everywhere. We're encouraged to look through a very small window or to ascertain what it is that we are capable of.
So I suppose people have their fears, and what they're conditioned into believing is the way we have to live, or the way we are. And that's where this cookie cutter inauthenticity comes from. But what you emphasize is that you feel it in yourself when other people are betraying themselves, that you're betraying yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
And so it's almost like, but the responsibility on each individual to be authentic is the solution, isn't it?
It truly is. But just like I don't want to have anyone tell me what it is that I should be doing with my life. If someone doesn't want to make those authentic choices for themselves, if they, through whatever traumas they might experience, or, pressure from family, or cultural pressure, or whatever it is to be or act, or, whatever a certain way, they have that choice that, it might not be good for them. It might not be the choice that I would make for them. But if I want autonomy over myself, I have to give that to other people. And if it feels as though I'm betraying myself, I still have to have that grace for someone else, that they can make their own decisions, don't I? Because I don't want anyone making those decisions for myself.
Yeah, and if you were to convince them, if you were to change their mind and to be like, look, this is the way you got to live, they might not be authentic even that way, because they wouldn't have come to that themselves. So fundamentally, would you say it's leading by example? That's a solution.
I do. And I think that there are ways that you can encourage people to maybe dip their toe into that authenticity, into living at that authentic life that, really that we're all meant and made to live. You can encourage someone to find a way to be self-employed, even if it's just a small piece of autonomy, like not having a boss, like that can really just by default put somebody in a position where they're automatically more authentic, because they might begin to say, well, self-employment does sound good. And what would I do if I was self-employed? And then they have to really start thinking about themselves and what they're capable of, and what they would be interested in doing, how they would like to earn money. And instantly, just by asking themselves those questions, they begin to know themselves better. And that's really what it's about. If you're going to have an authentic lifestyle, if you're going to be authentically you and offer that thing that only you can contribute, that nobody else can contribute, because we all have it, you have to start to get to know yourself. So I think that encouraging people to, by living by example, and by sharing that with other people just naturally in the way that you are, there's ripple effects to that. Every thought that we have, everything that we do, every thought we have, it matters. And the more authentic thoughts we have, the more those ripples are going to move out. And what might have seemed fringe, maybe just a few years ago, maybe in the next few years, it won't be fringe at all. It'll be the norm. So,
Yeah, definitely. And so suppose there are people who want to, they've reflected within and they're leading by example, but they might want to cooperate with other people who are also, you know, doing things, authentically. How would you help people to work together?
so the function of my app, Better Than Barter, it rewards people for doing favors for each other. So speaking to what you just, that idea that you just brought up, nobody can take anything out of the app. Like, you can't have other people do favors for you without having earned those favors first. Part of that process of being able to do favors for people is taking stock of what you're capable of. What are your abilities and your skills and your training and your talents, and what are your resources? You have to take a personal stock of yourself and understand exactly what your abilities and resources are. But once you do that, you kind of realize, like, oh, I can offer a lot, just to the people in my community. And once you start doing that, you start building trust. Your community starts to trust you. You gain more and more people in your community that trust you, and you start to build up what's kind of become a nasty term, but a social credit. You start to build up a social trust within your community. And that's really, really valuable. But what's happening all at the same time, that these little interactions, these little favors are taking place, everyone that's participating in that begins to do better. They begin to get improvements in their lives, whether they use their membership with Better Than Barter to get tutoring or to learn a new skill, or whatever it is. As these people begin to interact with each other, everyone begins to do better. Like a rising tide lifts all ships, right? And now I've lost sight of your original question.
No, that's all right. You answered it
Oh,
perfectly.
good. Wonderful.
So now what was my question? Oh, so is it a replacement of currency or is it parallel to currency?
This is interesting, right? Because it's not that I'm saying like currency is bad. I think that there's a lot of flaws in currency. I think that that our monetary system doesn't value the human individual as what they're worth. I like to use this as a kind of a macabre example, but on the black market, the human body, if you were to break it down piece by piece, like square inch of skin by eyeball, by kidney, by hair follicle, all of these things have a set price on the black market. And if you add up the total value of the human body for the pieces that can be sold on the black market, it's $43 million. $43 million. That's the value of your body, just without taking consciousness into consideration, right? And then juxtapose that to, in the United States, there's this argument, this debate and being had, and actually many politicians got elected on this idea that they're going to do a $15 an hour minimum wage. Well, if you were to work 40 years of your life full time for $15 an hour, the total value of your blood, sweat, and tears would be $1.2 million for an entire lifetime of work. I can say for sure that I know that the value of my blood, sweat, and tears, my effort, my consciousness, my ability to learn and grow is worth a hell of a lot more than $1.2 million. But that's what some people in America right now are fighting for. They're telling people that this is what you're worth. So when you're assigning a dollar value to someone's effort and someone's consciousness, someone's own individuality, no, there is no dollar amount that is appropriate, because human beings are priceless, we're precious.
Right. Yeah, you're not saying that it should be way higher, the pay per se. What you're saying is it's missing the whole point.
You're missing the whole point.
Yeah. Like,
and so one of the things that I really truly love about this app is that we trade favor for favor. So if you do a favor, you earn a favor, and you don't have to barter with the person that you did the favor for. If I'm a trained hairstylist, so let's say I want to earn a favor and I do a haircut for someone and they pay me with a favor. I don't have to use that favor with the person that I gave the haircut to. I can go and use it for whatever I want. So if I want to save, say, 5 favors, and I pay someone 5 favors to come over and build a deck for me. Well, my haircuts, I charge $45 for my haircuts. If 5 haircuts, 5 times 45, however much that, it's not anywhere near the value of having a beautiful deck added onto your house, right? But I get to decide what I spend my favors on. That means I get to decide what my time is worth. And every single member in the within the app membership gets to decide what their time is worth. Nobody gets to determine what they can spend their favor on. They get to decide.
I have a question though.
Yes.
So you decide what it's worth for you, but you can't decide what your credits are worth for someone else if they were to receive them. So
sure.
You might not know what. So when you're making it's not a trade per se. If you're making a barter, you might not know what, and they don't know what. How do we work out what we give and what we get for what we're getting without knowing what they want?
Let's use the example of getting a deck built. So let's say I pay a gentleman 1 favor to come over and give me an estimate about building my deck. So he'll tell me this is how much lumber and what type of lumber you need, and you need these kinds of screws and these kinds of brackets, and you might want to do your cement posts and all of that, help you figure out. I pay him 1 favor to come over and give me an estimate. Then he says, so I think I could get this job done working 4 hours a day for 5 days. So I'll do this job for you for 5 favors. Then I know, okay, I need to earn 5 favors and I can go out. Now, what if I have somebody else come over and give me an estimate and he says, I think I could get this job done in 3 days. So I'm going to charge you 3 favors. Well, I'm going to go with the guy who charges 3 favors, unless maybe he doesn't have as much experience as the one who wants 5 favors for it. Maybe the one who wants 5 favors is more experienced. there's all, you get to choose who you deal with, and those interactions, the app's not going to tell you how much to charge or how many favors to charge for your services. You know, if you want 5 favors, then you ask for 5 favors, and either they'll take you up on it or they won't. But here's where I do put a little bit of regulation on the interactions. If you're going to do a favor for someone and it's going to take 4 hours, you can't say, I want 4 favors for that. You know, if it's you know, an action of one single action, you can't, you know, I don't want people asking astronomical amounts just for one favor. You know, if you do a favor, you get a favor. If you go to somebody's house 5 days in a row and work on their house 5 days in a row, each one of those days is a favor. Does that make sense?
Right. What you're avoiding here is the issue of it just becoming overly mathematicized, if that's even a word.
Yeah,
overly quantitized instead of being the social thing that it is.
Yeah, because that's what it is. That the emphasis is on the social interaction, having connection with people in your community and letting them help you and you helping them. That's what it's about. So the only reason that there is even a favor token is to help facilitate that. You know, to know that, okay, well, this person has a favor to spend, so clearly they've done a favor for someone else in the community to earn this. You can't just go and buy tokens. You know what I'm saying?
That's definitely true. Yeah. And the more they've got, if they've got a lot of credits, so you're like, okay, they must be helping people a lot.
Yeah. Yes.
So
yeah, the more, yeah. And so let's say somebody wants to pay you 10 favors to do a job for them. They have done some work in their community to earn that. They've earned those 10 favors. That's somebody that you want to have a connection with in the community, you know, someone who is really out there. Just knowing that they have the 10 favors to spend might help or might encourage people to want to interact with that person. They're gaining that trust within the community.
Yeah, I would say that makes sense. So if value is subjective, do you feel like the socioeconomic side of this will just sort of naturally work out, and I wouldn't call them prices, but what people are willing to give for what will naturally harmonize?
I think so. I do think so. I think that the people will you know, one of the problems that I have with getting someone to kind of wrap their head around how it works is understanding that it's a different paradigm. Before this membership, you were used to trading your time for money, right? So you think, well, you know, this job is going to take me 4.5 hours and I'm going to make this much money per hour doing that. So I want to make sure that, you know, the favor that I use is worth that much time to me. Well, if that's how you want to think about it, that's great, but you're limiting yourself, because if you're trying to make sure that the favor that you spend is worth the time per dollar or per hour that you put into it, you're missing an opportunity to gain way more value for that favor. So I think that eventually people will start to see that old paradigm of thinking of trading time for money is self-limiting, and they're going to start opening their minds up to different possibilities.
Okay.
I also want to say, again, I don't think that money is bad. I think money is just a tool. So, for example, we charge a membership fee. There's a monthly or annual fee, however you want to pay, to be in the membership. And there's 2 reasons for that. Well, 3 reasons. First, some astronomical number, it's over 80% of free apps are never opened more than one time. So people fundamentally don't place value on something that is free. If it's a small, even if it's a small nominal amount, people are automatically more likely to value that which they're paying for. Second, there's a lot of work that goes in, to the back end through development and managing, a membership that, we hope is going to be as large as it will be. So membership fees also are going to help pay our independent team. But Better Than LLC, which is the parent company for Better Than Barter, our goal and ethos and logos for running a company is that we shall not have profits at all any year that we operate. And how we are going to manage to do that, because with membership subscription fees, there's quite a large amount of revenue, is that revenue goes right back into the community. So whether this will be neighborhood lotteries where somebody might get their mortgage paid off, or community gardens, or whatever it is, bringing, maybe solar panels to particular neighborhoods, or helping other neighborhoods figure out their water situation. We have a huge issue with accessible, clean, uncontaminated water in America, which I don't think a lot of people realize. So our goal is to not have any profits any time that we are in operation. And we're going to do that by giving that money for those subscription fees back into the membership.
Is this app, is it a company with shares, or is it a non-profit?
No, this is a privately held company.
Okay. So does it count as a corporation?
It's a limited liability corporation.
Okay.
Which means the business is separate from the members running it. So there's no personal liability. It's just a legal structure for a company.
Okay, fair enough. I had another question, but I can't remember it. So the can you buy your membership with cryptocurrency?
I definitely would like to be able to do that. We are looking into different ways to do that, but a lot of this is how we structure this now. This is, our app is actually in development at the moment. How we develop this now will determine whether or not later on we could be on a decentralized platform, which is my ultimate goal. It's a matter of finding a decentralized platform that is fitting and also will be mutually beneficial to both the company and the platform that we use. We're always looking for win-win situations when looking at working with other people and other projects. But that's something that I'm not only open to, I am actively pursuing for sure.
Right. Now, are you keen on, you mentioned, we discussed unity, and I'm sure you're aware that there are aspects of, well, you emphasize that you're not an anarchist, but you have respect for their ideas. Mm-hmm. And you might say that there's an ideological aspect to anarchy, potentially. So how is your emphasis on a means by which people, regardless of their beliefs, can work together?
I'm sorry, could you ask me that again? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was working out what I was saying as I was saying it, to be honest.
That's good. That's good. But yeah.
What do you think of the idea of transcending political divides?
Transcending political what?
Divides.
Oh, I think that it's absolutely necessary. I think that our political system is set up to keep us divided while believing that we have true freedom. I think that our political system is, well, first of all, it was implemented in a time before any of us can remember, right? And so things have been this way for as long as we can remember. We feel like this two-party system, electing representatives, the judicial system, all of these things are here for a reason because they've been around for so long. I think that the time that we are in right now is made for us to realize that we are not divided. And the more we realize that we are not divided, the more silly and inane these political systems are becoming. And
So there is an illusion of division, and
yes,
people are under that illusion. You could
yes.
say that they're divided, but really they're not. And when we realize that we are all, when the people realize, what happens when people realize that they are one whole and stop fighting each other?
I think that people don't need to realize that we are one whole, at least not to begin to move in a different direction. All people need to realize is that the division that they are carrying out themselves is to their detriment. And so this can happen, for example, by backing a particular political personality, say, because he's on your side and he's saying the things that you, or she is saying the things that you want them to say. They get into office and immediately begin to do none of the things that they said they were going to do for you. And you realize, oh, because I thought they were on my side, I thought that this would be beneficial to me. And they knew that. They used that to get me to vote for them, to elect them. And then they didn't honor that social contract that we had. I was hoodwinked by the idea that I'm divided. And this isn't a thought process that is so obvious for everyone. I think that this happens on an emotional and a spiritual level. They might not intellectually think through those steps of logic, but their body, their emotions, the way that they energetically communicate with reality is telling them something fundamental that they can't ignore. And so then there's phases of that. Oh, I'm so sorry. There's phases of that. People, you can think of the phases of grieving, which is, I think, what's happening right now. People are grieving the loss of the world that they thought that they had.
Right.
Because they are realizing that things are not what they thought. Things are an illusion. And now it's up to them, if they want to maintain a sense of sanity, it's up to them to decide for themselves what reality really is, what really is real. And what is real? Human connection is real. Our thoughts and our emotions are real. Stability, shelter, water, food, these are real things. All the rest of it is kind of ridiculous distraction, right?
Right. So I've got another question.
Yeah.
Are you saying that the problem is, if there's a problem, are you saying the issue is people's interaction energetically or mentally or literally with political institutions such as elections is, well, let me rephrase. Are you saying the way people interact with it is the problem, or are you saying the actual institutions themselves don't really, are just illusions that don't represent us anyway?
Well, those things can both be true at the same time. But when we think about what reality really is, the most valuable thing on the planet is your attention. So if you're paying attention to politics, if you're paying attention to political discourse or, legislation in your state or whatever it is, if you're paying attention to it, you're feeding it your power. One of the ways that I think we will inevitably see fundamental political change, not just in America, but I think all around the world, is people refusing to feed or deciding that there's no value in feeding these power structures, these informational, energetic power structures, their attention. And they begin to actually, instead of fighting this push and pull of fighting against or things that you think are unjust or are injustices, or political systems that seem corrupt, or the second that you pull your attention away from that, you stop fighting that, and you actually start to put your attention towards something that you do value, whatever that is. If it's valuable to you and you give your attention to it, you're feeding your power now to that thing that you would like to encourage. This is a fundamental, like on a quantum physics level, this is a fundamental truth of reality. And so I think that through trauma-induced consciousness, which is what the world is kind of going through right now, we're all getting our own pieces of elevated consciousness through trauma. I think that more and more people are going to stop valuing these informational power structures that they have been, political systems, trading their time for money, all of these things that have kind of been keeping us back, have been limiting us. They're going to stop paying attention to those things because they're going to want to see real tangible benefit in their lives. And they're going to start paying attention to those things instead.
Can I ask a sort of, well, I guess it's a question. It's sort of something came to me, or I realized something. So are you aware of the idea that the ego is an illusion?
Yes, yeah, of course.
Right. So, and I had this vision, I had a vision, not like that, but I had this image in my mind of like, so consciousness is like water. You keep pouring from, you pour consciousness into your ego that feeds illusion, right? Now, the state and a lot of the institutions that we have now are basically fed by ego. So it effectively, they're also illusion and they're also egoic, right? And perhaps the real governing is self-governing, maybe collaboratively, but not with these Leviathan institutions that ultimately are based on force and illusion. And perhaps the solution isn't in our interactions with those institutions, but rather maybe, well, a bit like how permaculture is a replacement for agriculture, just done by people interacting. Maybe even people's safety and security could be done in a way like permaculture, and maybe even using a means a bit like your app. What do you think of that?
Well, I want to address the ego first, because that's a lot to unpack.
Yes.
I think what's important to remember is that we are not our egos, right? The ego is, you put it, an illusion, right? I don't know that I think of it quite like that. To me, the ego is a tool that our psyche uses to be able to move around in the world. Our ego is what prioritizes so that we don't starve to death or lose our loved ones or whatever it is, and then on top of that, we have an outer projection of the ego, which is our persona. So when somebody says, "How are you today?" you say, "Oh, I'm good." That is, that's your persona. Behind that is the ego, the person running, or the ego thinks they're running the show. But behind that ego is your true self, you know, your spirit, your connection to source, the entity that understands what you are and who you are and what you're doing here. Some people don't ever realize, like they might realize that they're putting on a persona when they're out in public, and then at home they're a very different person and their ego is taking over, right? But some people don't even ever realize that they have an ego. They think that they are their persona. Hi, how are you? Oh, I'm good. Oh, the weather's good today. They never get down below that surface level in their consciousness. People who are in their ego, identifying with their ego, those are people who can be quite effective. I mean, if we look at the controllers of our world, those are people who very much identify with their ego. I came from this family, I went to this college, I got this degree, I held this office, and now I am the leader of the free world, and they identify with that ego.
So to clarify, what you're saying is that the illusion is when the ego is in charge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because if they were able to take a step back further into their own consciousness, they would realize that that ego is only how they've been navigating the physical world. But behind that is the non-physical self, the spiritual self, the higher self, or however you want to think about it. And that entity is so far different than the ego that many people are afraid to get to know that entity that is themselves. But they're afraid that maybe down, you know, Carl Jung talks about the shadow self and all of that. They're afraid to look down past that ego, because if they do, they're going to see those shadows of themselves, which is necessary. It's necessary to know the dark depths of yourself so that you can know who you are truly as a person. And if you can do that, if you can get past that ego level of yourself, you realize that, yes, I have this shadow self, but my shadow self also has a mirror. You know, I might think of myself, you know, maybe I learned at a very young age when I was a child and my mom yelled at me that I'm a selfish person, and that's part of my shadow. And so I try to keep that shadow self down. And in response to that, my mirror self has become generous. My mirror self is, you know, all of the opposite things that my shadow self is. But you won't know that you have both of those polarities within you all the time. And you won't be able to integrate them into yourself if you never get past the ego. And so I think that in terms of my app, I think that is definitely a tool to get people to realize, because the more people that we interact with, the more we have to really know ourselves, the more that we're challenged, you know, say that if there's a conflict or a disagreement, or maybe not even something negative, maybe it's something positive. You learned something from someone else that you didn't know that you wanted to know. You know, the more people that we interact with, the more we are challenged to know our shadow selves and our mirror selves. And that brings us closer to understanding our higher selves and what our purpose in life is and why are we here. We're not here for no reason. And you being here means something. So why are you here? You won't be able to ask yourself those questions until you get to know, or you won't get answers to those questions until you get to know who you really are.
So these questions are the authenticity that we talked about at the beginning. And when it coming back to the state, that, for example, is, and a lot of these, say, corporations as well could be like this, where they're run by egos, lots and lots of egos. And at the top, there might be another ego. And these are people run where their egos are in charge, right? And so that's how all these structures are illusionary structures, but we could have the real structures through people interacting, helping each other out, and your I can't remember what it's called, the tokens that you're talking about, the socioeconomics,
Favors.
is an example of that, I would say. And do you think people could even be kept safe through the favor system?
What do you mean kept safe?
Like what the state does is it has a monopoly in force and it has, say, policemen or the military, and it keeps people safe from, well, in theory anyway, from criminals or even.
Sure, I get what you're getting
Yeah.
at. So Better Than Barter, the app, is just a means of gathering the social network, right? With those membership fees that I talked about, that's how we're going to fund other crowdsourced projects. So Better Than LLC, Better Than the company, has other projects in the works too. We need our membership first before they can move forward, but eventually you will hear about projects like Better Than Health Share, Better Than Education, Better Than Childcare. And I would say with, it's at least in the United States, this push to defund the police. I think that eventually you could see it's a possibility in a climate like that where you would see Better Than enforcement. And I already know what I think that would look like. But yeah, so keeping people safe, yes. There are people in the world who are called to do that. That's what they want to do. And those people are valuable human beings, the protectors, you know, they need to be utilized and they need to be encouraged. And giving them a paycheck and a gun is not the appropriate way to do that, in my estimation.
So if they were held socially accountable, but also socially rewarded as part of a community.
And also, if the people who were protecting neighborhoods lived in those neighborhoods that they were protecting, how much more invested would they be in the outcome?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just had a thought that some critics might say, well, what's to stop it becoming feudalism?
What's what?
What would stop it from it becoming feudalism with the protectors taking over?
Um, Feudalism didn't have accountability. This is built, there's built-in accountability. That's how we maintain quality control.
And also, we're in an age of awakening, right? So potentially, as things transpire, we will have equal a basis of interaction that's more equal rather than hierarchical, and that's service to others, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I pretty much knew the answer, but I was curious about your answer to that question.
Okay, so tell me the question one more time, because I had something I wanted to say and it flew right out of my mind.
Okay. What was the question? So we were talking about effectively replacing the different aspects of the state with socioeconomics and the like, and keeping people safe. Oh, the issue, what to stop it becoming feudalism?
So we have kind of safety markers in place to prevent any sort of hierarchy from forming. Um, but what we have to remember is that if we want people to have self-governance and we want people to make choices for themselves, we have to allow them to participate at any level that they want to. And I think that when you remove money or a currency value from an interaction, suddenly people's motivations become different. Instead of, thinking about how much money do I need to earn to pay these bills, you begin to think in terms of what would I like to bring into my life. And that, I believe that paradigm shift removes the desire, I suppose, for power or status.
Right.
And if your needs are met, if you feel that you're being properly compensated, there's you suddenly don't have the motivation to, let's put it like, get one over. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
You suddenly don't have the motivation to be at the top of the ladder. There is no ladder. It's a level playing field. And so to have that, well, first of all, to have that type of mentality would just be useless in a program like this. You would be better off going and playing the stock market or whatever it is that you're interested in. But, and I have no illusions that this membership might not be for everyone. But for people who are interested in gaining some social stability in their communities, I think that there just is not enough motivation for a feudalistic scenario to come into being. And also, we have some safety markers too, in that if there's ever a gaming of the membership, if somebody's trying to take advantage of the membership or act inappropriately within the membership, there are safety markers against that, because we can't really be tolerating any type of dishonest interactions when the whole idea of the community project is, gaining social trust. So
Okay, that's a good answer. So one aspect in which we can build parallel new parallel systems to the collapsing systems at the moment is permaculture. What's your understanding of it?
now I haven't gotten into permaculture per se. What I'm really interested in is new gardening, farming, building, engineering ideas that are going to be sustainable without the support of our current systems, right? So if people are going around building houses with, drywall and lumber and all of those things, that's dependent on the lumber industry and drywall manufacturing and all of those things. I think that permaculture, yes, that fits into it. But what I'm really focused on is finding ways to bring hydroelectricity in practical ways. Using different building materials, different building methods. Our ancestors built underground. There were reasons for those things. So
Right.
I'm interested in using the earth. I'm interested in using natural materials in their natural state. And I think that if we can develop those technologies again that we've lost those technologies, I think that that's only going to reinforce our independence even more.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, actually. Like, we could do with more conscious supply chains, more conscious construction, and the whole economy is set up in a way that's fundamentally consumption and fundamentally built that in a way that doesn't sustain itself.
Why
And
do we have to replace our
yeah,
roofs every 25 years? That's insane to me. You would rebuild an entire part of your house every 25 years? How does that make sense? Why would we organize an entire society with housing that way? It's bananas.
yeah. So I guess the more people self-reflect, the more we can start developing ways of doing things in every aspect of our lives. That
Absolutely.
it's like sustainable, I suppose, and not in a sort of sustainable development, in a sort of um, gimmicky way, but like seriously working with nature, right?
Yeah. I would like to know that if I build a house, if I build a family dwelling, that it's going to be available to my family as far into the future as my family is, you know? Um, that's legacy, right? That's, providing for your progeny. And we used to know how to do that. We used to know how to do that. Things have only been this way for as long as we can remember. There used to be a different way to do things. And I'm very interested in learning those old methods for sure. And I think that the more, like you said, the more people begin to think this way, each individual is going to see a different problem and they're going to find a solution for it. So, imagine how quickly we can start solving some of the major issues like clean drinking water, enough food, shelter for everyone. How quickly we can start solving a lot of those problems, the more we encourage people to just start thinking about those problems.
Okay. Um, so I feel like this is where education comes in. A more conscious way of where in communities people can educate each other about precisely gaining understanding of how to do things in a simultaneously new and old way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so what are your thoughts on that?
Um, I think that if things continue, if our education system continues the way that it is, if our priorities are continued the way that it is, if the social norm of what your life is supposed to look like continues as it is, we will begin to lose essential people or essential skills like electricians and plumbers and ditch diggers and people who aren't considered, consequential to many people. We have a huge value on the high sciences and intellectual thought and all of that, which is wonderful. Beautiful contributions have been made to humanity through those practices. Um, but who's going to build what the engineer designs? Who is going to maintain the infrastructure? How much infrastructure is necessary if we can remember these old ways of building these infrastructures? Um, they're built to last. They're built to not need maintenance. These different technologies that we've kind of lost sight of or thought that we improved past, um, are still standing after thousands of years, and we can't seem to get a pipeline to not have a leak. So I think that, thinking about it in terms of my app, apprenticeship is going to be a big part of it. A woodworker might want to pass on his skill to someone before he dies. Any type of technical professional, to the ability to give them the ability to pass on their knowledge to someone who might not have the economic resources to go to school for that, but has the desire to want to learn, and to keep it alive, to keep that knowledge alive. That's really, really valuable, and that's something that I really want to encourage. And that's part of my vision for better than education, you know?
Do you think perhaps better than education could utilize the Akashic records?
I think that we are no longer in need of the Akashic records anymore. I
The
think
Akashic
that,
records.
yeah, I think that this is where everybody gets to see how crazy I really am. I think that humanity has exhausted what those records can provide for us. I think that the contemporary human mind and psyche is already, we are the Akashic records.
What about past lives, though? Because then back in the Atlantean era, there were ways of doing things that we could remember again.
We can access those any time that we want. We have people alive today who have the knowledge how to help you do that. We all individually are the Akashic records. Do you see what I'm saying? So this idea that, do you know there's the idea that everything we learn we're only remembering.
Yeah.
There is nothing external outside of ourselves. So and I know what you're saying, because we're talking about bringing back these old ways of being, right? But that's not that bringing back the old ways of being in themselves are not going to help propel us forward. We need to look at these old ways and this old knowledge and our old selves in the context of humanity today.
In the present.
In the present, because, let's say, for example, the technological reality of the world, say 5,000 years ago, is not what the technological reality of the world is today. Not to say that there aren't very, very valuable methods and techniques and technologies that we can't incorporate today, but they have to be put through the filter of where we are in humanity right now. And where are we in humanity right now? We are a highly traumatized, forgetful, scared species. And I say forgetful because many of us don't understand where we come from. We don't have any link to our ancestors. Many of us, I think that most of us, if we stop and think about it, have, whether it be our parents, our grandparents, or our great-grandparents, someone in our very distant, very close lineage who was an orphan, that had been removed from their family and their traditions, and they don't know who they are or where they came from. That creates a highly traumatized society. And those people, because of, again, political and religious ideals at the time, I'm speaking specifically between, in the Victorian era, because of those political and religious ideals, mothers were told that they were unfit. And if they weren't married, they were unfit. Or if you were poor, you were unfit, and your children were taken away from you and redistributed. In America, we had things called orphan trains. I don't know what they call them in other countries, but they were in Russia and Australia and Europe and Great Britain and all of these places. And so what they created was an entire generation of people who were removed from their heritage. And then the result of that is every generation after that being completely oblivious to their own traditions, to their own family's belief systems that they had evolved in.
So this is deliberate, fundamentally. It's like this
Well,
is a
it was.
conspiracy.
It was. I don't know if the consequences were deliberate, but the action, the removal of those kids from their families was deliberate. And who knows? Maybe some of those people thought that they were doing the right thing. Maybe they really believed that an unwed mother is an unfit mother, or a poor person is an unfit parent. But whatever the reason, the consequence of that was a deep, deep chasm created in the psyche of human beings. So much so that our contemporary man doesn't hold a lot of value of tradition. They don't
How do we
understand.
heal from this? Individually or collectively?
I think individually, it's all in that self-work. I hate to tell people, but it really does all come down to spirituality, understanding yourself, understanding your place in the world. Collectively, I think that comes along. Be the example. That if you want to see change in the world, you need to be the example. So I think collectively that healing will happen as people begin to understand that they need to heal. Yeah.
Perhaps the better than system could, or extensions of it, like could apply to healing, whether through psychology and or, spiritual healing methods,
Mm-hmm.
and people
Mm-hmm.
doing the inner work, helping people do that. I guess there is an awakening happening anyway, but yeah, I love how all this fits together. It's so, I guess it's beautiful. There's a lot of sadness to it, perhaps, but I can really see how a new earth can be built with the things we've been talking about, right? Would you agree?
Yeah. And there is a sadness to it, but um, you don't know that something, you can't conceive of a beautiful idea like better than if there isn't a motivation for it, right? You can't, and this is, the beautiful paradox of physical reality is there's always positive and negative. The positive result of a negative action is motivation, right? So, what is it? Necessity breeds innovation, or something like
Yeah.
that. I butchered the quote, but so that in a sense, I can be thankful for that sadness, or that kind of sorrowful state that humanity has been in at least the last few hundred years. Um, because it created a world in which I was born, and I was able to see a need within myself to heal. And because of that, I wanted to help other people. And so, better than, you know, um, we don't need to, we don't need to wallow in that sadness, or that anger, or whatever negative emotion comes up because of the circumstances that we find ourselves in. I think that it would aid us greatly to be grateful for it, you know.
Yeah, perhaps it needs to get worse before it can get better than how it has been.
Yeah, yeah. I don't like to hear it, but I know that it's true. You know, it's not one of those truths that sits very well with me. I wish that things could be easier, but I think about this in terms of raising a child too. I had a very difficult childhood, and I don't want my kids to have a difficult childhood in the way that I did, but my childhood and my upbringing and my experiences made me who I am, and I love myself. I think that I'm a valuable human being. I think that I have a lot to offer to the world, and I wonder if growing up without adversity makes a less rich person. I don't know. But all I know is that I do want my children to have the best, safest, most secure life that I can provide for them. So that in parenting, that's the challenge: is how do you give your children adversity, but not really, you know?
I would say perhaps that you don't need to worry about a lack of adversity at a time like this.
That's a good point. There's enough happening in the world where if you can make it as good for your children as you can, you're probably doing the right thing. Absolutely.
It's just that it comes down to asking yourself, what is the best you can do? Because I know that, someone who's sheltered in certain respects might actually realize later that um, there are certain things they missed out on. Like I was quite fortunate in a material sense growing up, but there was definitely issues that you could say held me back, but that weren't material. But on the other hand, I suppose, like maybe events in our life are meant to happen for a reason. So who's to say it was really a problem? It's just,
Yeah,
yeah.
and you can, you can try to give your children the best life that they can have. Um, and maybe that's the move to make, because you never know what life is going to throw at them. So maybe make it as good as you can, But with that being said, I definitely don't shelter my children. Um, I want them to be exposed to the world and to know what the world is and to understand it for what it is. And I have very adult conversations with my kids sometimes, usually prompted by them asking me questions and thinking in the moment, do I omit certain things, to protect them, or am I just honest with them? And I find usually honesty in the moment breeds a really good conversation with them. So yeah, I have to say that I agree with you.
And authenticity is, you seek to be authentic, and I imagine that you seek for your children to learn to be authentic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's part of homeschooling, right? Like, so we homeschool mostly because I don't want to stifle them. I don't want them to feel as though um, their interests or their beliefs or their attitudes or energy is unacceptable. So yeah, that's a huge motivation for homeschooling, is encouraging their authenticity.
So, how would you like to summarize everything we've been talking about and maybe more? Um, because I feel like we're coming to a point we might round this episode out.
Okay. Um, if I could just leave it in one place, it would be that if you haven't, the listener, speaking to the listener, if you haven't realized yet that you're, in the words of Derek Brose from The Conscious Resistance, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. If you don't know that yet, hold on to your seatbelts, because the world is about to become a place where it will be undeniable. So I look forward to seeing um, what everyone's full human potential creates, and I hope that someone listening to this podcast makes something so incredible that I get to shake their hand someday.
Well said. And if you've been listening to this all the way to here, thank you. Um, I'm sure you haven't regretted it, or I hope you haven't anyway. Um, and have a nice day, and bye for now.